Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our third annual Wild Wisconsin Winter Web Conference. I'm Jamie Machik with the Nicolet Federated Library System in Green Bay, and on behalf of myself and the other systems who help sponsor this event, we are very glad you are here with us this morning. We have 5 sessions today and 5 tomorrow on a variety of topics that we think that you will find valuable. I'm seeing over 100 attendees signed in already for this one, which is awesome. So our first presenter today is Erica Reynolds of BiblioCommons. And Erica, I couldn't remember for the life of me how I first met you. I remember you doing a webinar on grant writing for us maybe 2 years ago, and I remember meeting you at the Computers and Libraries
Conference.
I think
it was at Computers and Libraries, yeah.
Is that where we first met? Okay, and I remember actually meeting you. I was probably like your Facebook friend first. I actually met you. Anyway, Erica is a very energetic person, energetic presenter, and I'm really excited to hear what she has to say today about patron experiences. So, Erica, whenever you are ready.
Great. Well, thanks so much, and thanks for the opportunity to speak to everyone. Feel free to ask questions as we go, and Jamie and Jean will let me know what questions pop in. So today I want to talk about looking. There's nothing here that's really, rocket science or something like that, but I think in public libraries so often we just don't take the time to stop and look. We just make assumptions because we just live in these worlds all the time. So just wanted to, in case you have questions for me later, you can reach me at @Queequegs or erica@bibliocommons.com. So when you think about the places that we work of public libraries, whether it's a small town library or it's a branch of a larger system or it's, a huge, grand central library, our library spaces, I think often we feel just as familiar about with our library spaces as we do our physical, our own homes. These are places we spend so much time, and so we just assume we understand what's happening in these places. And we also become a bit blind to how the actual patron experience is really occurring when, we see it from the staff perspective all the time. And when I was the IT director at Johnson County Library, even though I worked really hard to see things from the patron perspective and tried to always get out and ask people who weren't using the library, how, why not, or what was their experience, or casual library users, and I didn't realize how really I was unable to get out of my own head as a public library staff member until I actually left. And even then, I can't really see it as a true patron. And so I think these are all techniques for us to help see things through the patron perspective, which then can speak to how we might want to enhance our patron services in the future. So we think about how much time we spend in our libraries. You think about all the things that we're doing in libraries. So, we're moving material handling, books coming in, holds are being placed. We're presenting programs, coordinating programs, helping patrons, troubleshooting our 3D printers. There's just a million things to do, and of course we have thousands and thousands of meetings. We spend so much time in meetings in public libraries. So, then we come back to our desks and they're piled up. So of course we think, oh, I don't have time to do observations. I don't have time to really stop and think and run any kind of studies. And this doesn't have to be, hard science, but being able to stop and think and really observe is so important. So one thing that is sort of an inspiration for you as trying to encourage everyone to stop and really take some time to observe patrons in different experiences is from Ken Blanchard, who is a very prolific writer. He's written over 50 books. Probably most popular is The 1 Minute Manager, but millions and millions of business books that have been translated. And one of his quotes, which is usually attributed to him, although it is often talked about in kind of motivational business conversations, but to not quack like a duck, but rather soar like an eagle. So when I first read this or heard him talking about the, don't be like a duck, soar like an eagle, somehow this really stuck in my head. And I think it's because personally I have a lot of duckish traits. Number one, I talk a lot. So when I'm at the library, I really see myself being a quacker. So I'm like, quack, quack, quack. Oh, this is happening, quack, quack, quack. Oh, there's fire over here, quack, quack, quack. And, in many ways, that's not a really empowered way to think about your day. When you just respond to everything and just kind of go along as part of the crowd and let this sort of everyday action of the library take you, you're not really taking the time to think, how does the patron experience work and how could we make it better? So I like this idea of aspiring to be more like an eagle than a duck. So when you think about eagle traits, soaring above, really feeling empowered to take the time to observe before reacting and really taking the high view. So hopefully that provides you a little bit of inspiration for really giving yourself the permission to carve out the time to stop and observe how patrons are really using the library, and we're going to talk about tools to do that. One of my favorite and it wasn't ever really a requirement that we had at the library, but my favorite things we ever did is that we had a group of people, we were all administrators, and we just all agreed to create a special club, which was no meetings Fridays. And I cannot tell you how awesome it is. So we just said, we cannot schedule a meeting on Friday. It will not happen. And we didn't, we didn't make some sort of proclamation. We didn't require this from anybody else. We just said, we're part of the No Meetings Friday Club. And if it's really true that we absolutely, can't kick off this project or work on this project if we can't schedule a meeting on Friday, then we're doing too many things at once. We need to slow down. And we have that kind of luxury. It's just that we don't feel like we have that luxury. But it was so empowering to just say, nope, I'm not going to accept any meetings on Friday. That's going to be time that I, get my head together. I work on projects. I'm not getting interrupted. And we got so much great work done. So that was often the time when I would go out and do observations and then also bringing other people into that work. So hopefully, seeing really the high view of how the library is working for patrons. So where are you going to observe? Well, you need to observe the physical library, our spaces, the outside of the building, really seeing how the patron experience works physically in, the actual environment. But then also your virtual experience, so your online library. More patrons visit the library's website often and the catalog more than all the people actually walking into the building, and that depends on the library, but that's true in lots of places that the online library is the #1 service point for the library in terms of online holds and renewals. So observing how the online library experience works. And then the other thing is this sort of exciting place in between, which happens with mobile. So, I have my mobile device with me, and I walk into the library. So now I'm actually having kind of a merged hybrid experience that I can look at my mobile, but I can also physically be in the library. So, how do we observe that experience? And the other thing I just want to point out is that as you think about having these sort of taking time to do observations and seeing how patron experience is really happening, is that it's not just about finding what's not working. It's also finding what is working. So avoid biasing your own observations with negative or positive presumptions. Just stop and look and listen without judgment, and then you'll make recordings of that and then go on to, do some analysis and discussion afterwards. But I do think that it's important when staff know that you're doing observations in different ways. It can make people feel really nervous. And if they just think it's about someone coming out to observe them and figure out what's not working or, what are you doing wrong, that's not a way where you're really going to empower people and make them feel like they appreciate the observations and will appreciate, this kind of activity. So, again, always focusing on just observing and paying attention to what is working as well as maybe what could be improved. So here's some basic concepts and some different activities. So one is just walking in the patron's path, and we'll talk about some different ways to do that. 2 is just very simple observations. 3 is interviews either on the fly or scheduled. And then 4 is secret shoppers. So number 1, walking in the patron's path. So with hopes, after this presentation and, maybe in the next couple of weeks, you'll take some time to think, okay, let's just go ahead and we'll walk in the patron's path. Now, of course, we see patrons coming in all the time. We usually think of ourselves as patrons too because we check out. I think most of the time in a public library we have a pretty good idea of what's happening for patrons. But very rarely are we really experiencing the library from a patron's perspective. So with the idea of walking in the patron's path, it's helpful to kind of write down some notes of why am I coming to the library today. So I'm going to pretend I'm a patron at my library and, and make some notes of what am I doing. Am I coming to attend a program? Am I coming to pick up a hold? Am I coming to just browse and see something, just look for something good to read? So make some notes, and then once you decide why you're going to come to the library, do it once as a totally new patron, like someone who just moved to your community and doesn't have a library card yet, and then do it another time as a current patron, so someone who does have a library card. And then really commit to it. It will feel a little silly, but start and end your experience as a patron. So you should get in your car. You should park in the patron's lot, not the staff lot if those are different places. You should walk in the patron, the front doors, and just really experience it. Try to, kind of clear your head and think, okay, this is the first time I've ever walked in this library, and I'm just a library patron, and I'm here to do whatever task you've set aside for yourself to do. And then finish your task and actually leave from the patron's lot. Again, totally commit to it, and don't get sidetracked. It's actually very easy to get sidetracked while you're going through these experiences. Bring a notebook and a pen or some way to record your experience, and just note everything that catches your eye. Whether it's positive or not so positive, neutral, just make notes. And then extra credit is to do all this from a wheelchair. So again, you're just trying to see how are patrons experiencing your library, and then making notes on what is working and what's not working for future sort of discussion. I will say that with all of these examples, so when you do one, it's helpful to do the activity a few times, and then you might have an idea of how you want to do a more targeted study. So it's helpful to do it a few times and then set up some specific things you're going to look for as you progress. So another way to walk in the patron's path is online. So in this case, you're going to use the library's website. And again, decide why are you coming to the library's website. Most patrons don't just visit the library's website for fun. So most patrons, are they coming to place a hold? Are they coming to see when the library is open? What's their task? And then again, do it once as a totally new patron. So you need to start at Google, because a totally new patron to your community is not going to know the library's URL, for example. And do it once as a current patron. The other thing about this is that you should probably do it outside the library so that you're not getting influenced by any kind of configurations that you have on your library computers. You want to experience it as a patron who's not in the library's network. And again, totally commit to it. Start and end as a patron, and don't get sidetracked. Record your experience. Note everything that catches your eye, positive, not so positive, and neutral. So here's walking in the patron's path in the mobile world. So let's say you're a new patron, you've just moved to town, and you want to visit the public library. So from your phone, what can you do? Can you find the library online via your phone? Is there an app? Can you find the library hours and locations easily? Just walk through the whole experience. And then as a current patron, let's say, leave the library. You could be out shopping. And you get an email from the library on your phone that a new title is coming due, or a title that you already have checked out, rather, is coming due. So can you renew it from your phone right then? What happens? And walk through the whole experience again, taking notes. Or another way to see it is, let's say you're out away from the library and you receive an email on your phone that a hold is ready to be picked up. How can you figure out if the location is open? And what if you forgot how to get there? And, this depends on your community, but, even in suburban Kansas City, lots of times staff assume that patrons all know every single location the library has, and we just refer to them because, again, it's become so ingrained for us. But lots of times we would do studies with patrons, and they actually didn't know which library was which and where they really were. So just reminding folks, you want to be able to look up the location and see the hours to know whether or not you can pick up your hold. So if you got your email, on a Sunday, would you know if you could pick up your hold that day? Or if you got your email at 9 a.m. in the morning, can you know if the library is open? So again, walk through the whole experience until you've got the title in your hand and you've checked it out and walked back out to your car. Again, this can all feel a little silly, but I promise that if you do go through these experiences and really commit to them, you will always find something amazing. Something either exciting, something that really wasn't working and needs to be fixed. And it's just so interesting and revealing when you actually walk through the entire experience as a patron. So that's one way to do it. Another thing is just simple observations to watch patrons coming in. Again, this is a good start to a study to first start with some observations, and then you can refine your studies and make them more targeted as you consider some different things that you might want to look into. So really just sitting down and looking and listening. So watching people as they come into the building, what do they do, where do they go, recording your experiences. This is an easy time that you can just bring your laptop out on the floor and take notes while you're watching people move around the building. But then paying attention to these trends, if it's different in the daytime, in the evening, as you might expect, on a weekend. You can also watch people using your website and your library technology. Just position yourself over by the library computers so you can kind of peer over people's shoulders and see what they're doing and what they're clicking on. And so, again, the observations would be more things that you can just watch, and then that might be a step to this next phase, which is more interviews on the fly or scheduled interviews. So with on-the-fly interviews, you're really just talking to people as they're coming into the library or leaving the library. So as people come in, you just let them know that you're looking to improve library services and ask if it's okay if you ask a few questions. Let them know it's not going to take any more than like 5 minutes of their time. Obviously, you don't want to ask leading questions. You're just going to stay totally neutral. If patrons are using their own devices or are using one of your in-house computers, feel free to ask them how, if they're using the library's Wi-Fi or the website or, questions like that. So here's some examples of just really general questions you could ask as people are coming into the library. Why did you come into the library today? How often do you visit the library? How often do you visit other library locations, if that's applicable, so that you can determine whether or not the same folks who are coming to your branch also go to other branches or, things like that. And so this might also then lead to a more targeted study, but just getting a sense. So as a whole, as people come in, why are they normally coming to the library? Are they coming to use the computers? Are they coming for an event? Are they coming to pick up their holds? Are they just coming to browse and find something good? And then these are some other questions to ask as people are leaving. Why did you come to the library today? Why did you accomplish what you had hoped? What else did you do while you were at the library? So maybe I came in to check out my holds, but then I also went over and looked at the new bookshelf. Some questions that you might ask on the fly about the library's technology. You could ask people who are on the computers, how often do you use the library's computers? What do you use the library's computers for? How often do you use the website? What do you use the website for? How often do you use the library's Wi-Fi? And again, when patrons, some patrons will be really talky and be interested in sharing more information, and that information might then lead to more things that you want to investigate. Now, scheduled interviews is really the sky's the limit because you have more of a chance to develop a script and observe and hear more about the patrons' in-library, online experience, or mobile experience. So I think still you want to keep your interviews to about 30 minutes to 45 minutes at most. It could be kind of tiring for a patron when they feel like they're kind of like under the microscope for a long time. I think generally it helps to have 2 library folks to 1 patron if it's adults. So you want to have the person who's the moderator, and you want to have someone who's taking notes, and then have the patron there, answering the questions and talking about their experience. Also, if you're working with teens or kids, you need to get permission from their parents, but you need to let them outnumber you. So there's some pretty good research that talks about that, kids will really feel under the microscope if there's more adults than kids. So maybe 2 library folks to 4 kids, for example, and they're going to talk amongst themselves and let them do that. So they're kind of talking about their experience as a whole. That would probably feel more comfortable to them. Remind them, regardless of their kids or teens or adults, that there's no wrong answers, and you're just there and interested to hear about their experience. Most people who volunteer for these are happy to share more information. And so in terms of what to ask, really the sky's the limit. Everything from very general questions about their library experience to actual formal usability studies are all options here. So here's some ideas. Describe a recent library experience you had and what stood out for you. How do you normally use the library? If they regularly use their website, a really good thing to do is to give them a blank sheet of paper and just ask them to draw your website. So again, you would only do this for someone who says, I use the website all the time. But it's really interesting, and I'll show you some examples of what we did with Chicago Public when people draw the website, even when they visit it every day. Another thing is to do more usability studies, have a computer available, and ask them to use your website or catalog as they normally would. And that's not really a full-blown study. I'll share some resources on that if that's what you would like to do. But just watching people use your site and catalog can be really interesting because over and over again, we find that patrons and librarians really don't use library websites and catalogs the same. So just having the time to watch them use it will be very interesting to you, I think. So the other option is just using secret shoppers. These can be all ages. So it can be, a 12-year-old, it can be a 16-year-old, it can be, whatever, adults, senior citizens, and helpful to use a wide variety of folks. But no librarians are allowed. I don't think even realize how much our experience of using libraries is really quite different from how the general public use libraries. I think that out-of-town guests are very helpful for this. So when you have people visiting you, ask them to go use your library and give them some questions or things they should go do, and then some common tasks. And then right when they're done, interview them right away and ask them to record their experiences. This can be really helpful because, as long as they're not librarians, really letting them go experience it and then report back. It doesn't have to be like a really formal secret shopper program. I think that you will find that even a very basic kind of experience will be telling and interesting to you. So after you've done some interviews and observations, you might want to do more. And if you do that, then definitely make a plan for easily sharing the results with others. So if you are going to spend the time doing this, which I hope you do, you want that time to benefit everybody. So one really easy way to share the results is to set up an online survey that only you or other people who are conducting the interviews or the observations are going to enter into. So you're going to enter your results there, and that will help you provide quick reports and charts, if applicable. So as just one example, one time we did a number of sort of observations and interviews with people around our self-check machines. So our library had a lot of self-check machines, and they had some configuration options, but we didn't just want to make assumptions of how we should configure them and the kind of questions and how the screen should go. We wanted to see how patrons were using them and then configure from there. So with that, we did a couple of observations with folks, watched them use them. That then helped us create a kind of basically a survey, but rather than ask them to do the survey, we just asked them the questions. And we were able to standardize it so then different people at the branches, we talked about it, so we had a different representative at each branch. They then helped us develop the sort of survey questions, and then they could go and, after each interview, enter the results into the survey question, so then we were able to quickly compile the results across all of the branches that had participated. It was also nice because then you have different representatives at each location, participating in the study, and it's really interesting to hear what people say, and, it feels like you're really getting close to the patron experience and making sure that whatever you develop, whatever decisions you make, are all based on these observations and this input from how patrons are actually experiencing your library's technology or experience as a whole. So online surveys like Zoomerang or SurveyMonkey are really helpful for this. And then even if it's just one page, which would actually be great, even though I think everyone finds actually participating in the observations and interviews pretty interesting, not everybody loves reading reports about them. So one page is great, but even if it's not a very long report or you don't have too much to share, others will appreciate hearing about your observations and findings. So, do share it with your colleagues after you have conducted, a bit more of a study. So, in terms of the analysis and response, so of course, you're doing all this so that you can improve library services. And taking the time to stop and really observe before you make any decisions or want to pilot something. So, of course, an easy thing is to just look for any low-hanging fruit that could be easily improved. Maybe it's just that your secret shoppers went in and they're like, wow, it's really cluttered and there's a million signs everywhere and I didn't really understand where I was supposed to go to do whatever. I think clutter is one of the easiest things to do in libraries to clean up. And I like to think about this from the perspective of like when you put your house on the market and you need to stage your house. Lots of times real estate experts will advise just getting tons of your stuff out of your house and putting it in storage so that your house looks sort of open and, super clean, but also not quite so personal. So
Erica?
I think that that's often a good activity. Please.
A question just came in, and you said you didn't mind if I interrupted, so I did.
Absolutely.
How often do you conduct the surveys, secret shoppers? Do you do it periodically, continually?
I think it's whatever you want to do. I think that doing it continually is a great idea, but you also might want to do it during a certain time and then report back.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So, really thinking about what if you were staging your library, and also thinking about really, decreasing the number of signs that are around. In general, if you have to have a lot of signs, it means the design of the library isn't working well because it should just be obvious what people do. There's all kinds of discussions about too much sort of library clutter, and there's lots of articles on that or suggestions around that. But whether it's your physical library, your online library, or even the mobile, I would generally hazard to guess that most librarians are okay with more sort of information and just sort of stuff around than lots of the general public. Like it feels kind of like information overload when there's all this stuff coming at you. And then when we live in these spaces and we see lots of signs and we have piles of paper on the desk and things like that, it doesn't really bother us that much because we're there all the time. But thinking about how does that make that patron feel when they walk in? Do they feel welcome? Do they feel like this is an open space that they can kind of let their mind wander? We have lots of stuff in our library. So lots of times clutter is an easy, low-hanging fruit to improve the experience. But who knows what you found in your observations and what your secret shoppers might have found and how can that be addressed. So the other thing is what was really working and should be commended and shared and celebrated. Again, it's so important to not just look for what's not working. You want to look for what things have worked really well and maybe want to be not just sort of commended, but maybe we want to do that across the system. So if you see in one place, catch a staff member doing something really great, maybe that's something that they could then do a presentation to everybody else about, oh, how did they make that happen? Or, just thinking about what's working, not just what's broken. Of course, you're going to look to see were there any major issues identified that need to be addressed. Maybe that needs to be an additional study later or right away. And then also, would it be more helpful to do some more targeted studies? And then perhaps you want to do a pilot project, so you identify some issues, you think you have a good answer to fix them, but before you institutionalize that, run it as a pilot project, and of course, you still want to study that one too. So it's always about looking first, watching, seeing how it's working or not working, and then making iterative adjustments.
Erica, we had a comment come in from Leanne, and she said, speaking of clutter, we will be remodeling a staff work area soon. Nothing is more shocking than seeing photos of your hot mess. Photos show the reality, so this is very motivating.
Oh, good. Actually, that's such a good example because I really wanted to talk about that too, is that when we think about our public areas, when we think about our libraries, lots of times we only think about the public area and not the staff side.
Yes.
But it can be really tiring to walk into the staff area and just see piles of junk around you all the time.
Yes.
So I was in IT, and I don't know, maybe not. Maybe everybody has really clean IT areas, and my was just terrible. But like we had stacks of just junk. Now, of course, it can be hard, and it can feel difficult because, lots of times there's rules that you can't just like throw things away.
Right.
You have to go through some sort of process, and they have to go through, maybe the county or the city, and
Correct.
there's, they have to be wiped clean. But yeah, no, I totally agree that cleaning up the staff area, and that would be a really good project to, like, I bet there's probably staff members, who would love to clean it and get things taken care of. For as many librarians who are okay with clutter, there's a lot of librarians who hate clutter and are happy to dive in and attack it. So that might be a very empowering job for someone to do, like, over a couple days.
Yes. Thank you.
So another thing, and actually, now that I think about it, I think that this is when Jamie and I first met, is when we did a presentation. I did a presentation at Computers and Libraries on this book. So before you decide what to do about whatever you might have found in your studies, before you add something, like add a new program, add whatever, think about what you could subtract. So this book, I highly recommend it. I think it's a great book for like a staff reading group to all read together and to think about how it might apply to decision making in the future. But in this book, In Pursuit of Elegance by Matthew May, he just talks about how so often it is our first impulse that if we see a problem, we want to jump on it, we want to act, we want to add something to fix it, when what we should do sometimes is stop and maybe there's something we can take away. He talks about in Scandinavia there were some towns that had like terrible traffic problems, and their way to address them was actually to take out all the traffic signs. That seems so counterintuitive that would work, but it worked beautifully because rather than people just blindly going, oh, green light, oh, red light, oh, green light, they had to stop and think when they approached the intersection. So these intersections that included, cars and trucks, but also bicycles and pedestrians walking, they significantly became more safe. The traffic flowed better when they actually took away the traffic signs. So thinking about how we can do that in libraries, this is a great book as sort of inspiration for you. Some other recommended titles for anything in, dealing with any kind of issues that might arise or new services that you might want to develop. I highly recommend Switch by Chip and Dan Heath, How to Change Things When Change is Hard. It's not just about the psychological sort of difficulties of instituting change, but also, again, how you can look for what is working. So when you see like a really big, thorny problem that seems impossible to change, looking at the parts that are working and then moving from there. Another one is Nudge, and it's all about how do you sort of nudge people toward decisions that will make them healthier, happier, and that people don't always, people don't always make the best decisions for themselves because we make so many decisions based on just sort of inertia and sort of our current path. So how can you nudge people to a better path that is sort of better for the community as a whole? And another one is The Paradox of Choice, Why More is Less by Barry Schwartz. This is a great book and really talks about how we think we want more choices, but actually choices exhaust us. And there's some different examples. I actually think there's some studies that actually show up in all three of these books. But one example that they had is that when shoppers were shown, I think it was something like 3 or 4 different kinds of jam that they might try. They tried them and bought some, and then they were shown another like bigger table that had something like 20 or 30 kinds of jam. So on one hand, it's like, wow, look at all these choices. But then people didn't purchase because in the concept there is that, oh, it's just too overwhelming. When I have like 25 options, like I don't know what I want, so I'm just going to opt out and walk away. And so there's lots of times in libraries I think we want to provide lots of choices. Clearly, we're serving so many different types of people. It's hard to be the right choice for everyone and to make one choice that's going to work for everyone. But also remembering that for many people, and really most of us, having lots of choices is actually not super comfortable. So just trying to find that right balance. So I think all three of these books are great books for determining how you're going to improve the services once you've done observations and have good ideas of what is or is not working and how you might want to address it. So I wanted to show some examples of some past studies I've been involved with and some sort of interesting findings, just to give you some ideas of what you might stumble upon, and also to show that every time I've done a study, I've found something interesting. Even just spending time on the floor, I've always found something that I wanted to then address, or I felt like I could improve or build on or celebrate. So talking about different website improvements, we ran a whole bunch of studies when we were redoing our intranet design. Also the self-check configurations, shelving and signage planning, general enhancement of the patron experience, really anything is fair game. So here's one thing that we found. As you can tell, this is my very fancy usability tool. So in this case, it's index cards. But this was a couple years ago. But when I had started at Johnson County, there was a section of the website called Reader's Corner. And they actually called it Reader's Corner because it used to be called Reader's Advisory. And when they had talked to patrons, people didn't know what Reader's Advisory was. They thought it might be something actually like a concern, like small craft warning or advisory, So they didn't like that term. But then they chose Reader's Corner, and they actually never did another study. So they did fix something that wasn't working particularly well, but they didn't go back and study that term of whether or not that was actually the right choice. So when we did new web design, we asked people about that term, and most adults thought it was really confusing. Most adults thought Reader's Corner must be something for kids, which it was not. And I've seen the term Reader's Corner on other people's websites since then, and I've never seen Reader's Corner as referring to kids or teens services, but it's interesting to me that the majority of the patrons that we talked to assumed it must be something for little kids and would not click on it. So we did a card sort and asked people, actually there's a process. So first, I asked the Reader's Advisory Committee to come up with 6 terms that they might want to test. So even though I was on the IT side of things, I felt it was very important to involve my colleagues on something that they care desperately about, obviously, because they're Reader's Advisory people. So they came up with terms, and then we tested out the 6 ones, and we tested them in multiple locations, and immediately Find a Good Book spiked. Everyone thought that I would click on Find a Good Book for the kind of information that was behind that link. So that's just one example of something that was, very effective. And while, of course, that takes more time than, someone just making the executive decision, we're going to switch it to Find a Good Book. When you do these kind of these projects, everyone is on board with you. And it wasn't just a top-down decision. Everyone was involved. And I really think that's the way public libraries work most effectively, is when we're all on the same page and we're all moving together. Even if it might take a bit more time, there also might be more time if you think about an executive decision that then people are grumbly about. So I always feel like doing a bit of time to do a study together always gets us to where we want to go in a more efficient way. This is sort of a silly one, but it worked. So as we designed our intranet, so of course this is only staff side, we had reached a bit of an impasse because some people at the library loved the idea of having a section of the page that talked about birthdays, or who was having a kid, or who was getting married, or who was having an anniversary, and they really liked that information that used to be in the staff newsletter. But we were trying to transition everything to be more efficient and just be on the intranet. So some people were like, okay, if we're going to get rid of our staff newsletter, we need the intranet to reflect this, nice information about people. Other people at the library detested that stuff. They were like, I don't care who's having a baby. I don't care whose birthday it is, which seems really harsh, but I get it. Some people are very just sort of focused and businesslike and just want to get in and get out. And they didn't want the intranet, in their mind, cluttered with this information. So we were trying to think of, like, how do we sort of solve those problems? So one of my colleagues came up with the idea that we would have a label on the intranet that was warm fuzzies. So it was clear that people who wanted to have warm fuzzies and to have this kind of information, they would know where to find it. And if someone doesn't want that, they're not going to stumble upon it because they would never click on such a thing. So it was kind of a funny label, but it totally worked. So that was kind of a fun thing. One thing that we found in lots of our usability studies, and I've since found this with every library we've worked with, is that most patrons don't, when they go to the library's webpage, they don't actually look for anything on the website except for they go straight into the account or into search the catalog. So in some ways, it can be very frustrating to do a lot of website usability when patrons aren't even going to use your website. They're just going to go straight into your catalog. But it's interesting and good to know. That's in many ways why I work with BiblioCommons now, because that's I wanted to address that. And so I'm happy to talk about that as well. And so another thing, this was not an online study, but rather just what were patrons doing when they came in and they were looking for books? Were more patrons looking for a known title or picking up their holds, or were more patrons just coming in to browse for something good? Maybe looking at the new bookshelf, looking at staff pick shelf, or is there a mix? So this actually kind of came up because we were having these internal discussions on the administrative team from the library. And we, of course, all had our opinions about what we thought more patrons were doing. Some people believed that, the majority of people were just coming in, picking up their hold and leaving. Other people were like, no, more people just come in and are just looking for something good. So we're like, well, let's just do some studies. Again, it's not science, but let's just see. And for the most part, it was about 50-50. And some people, of course, did both. But definitely there were more adult browsers on the weekends, and families really saw coming to the library on the weekend as a regular family social activity. And for some reason, on the weekend, parents were more likely to look for their own reading material or their own sort of information, whereas on the weekdays, it seemed like parents who came to the library with their kids, weren't so interested in looking for their own reading. So I'm not saying that any of this, again, was necessarily conclusive, but it was enough to know that, like, okay, it's pretty much a mix. So, it's not all of one or the other. So that might then speak to how we want to arrange the staff picks, shelf. Maybe we want the new titles and the staff picks shelves closer to the holds. So if I am coming in, I might also see something else that has been recommended to me by the library or something new. So here's another example. This is something we did at BiblioCommons. So this was the Chicago Public Library website before. So we did not do this one. This was done by Indeka a few years ago. And so we worked with Chicago Public, and one of the first things we did is we did an online survey, and a lot of their active patrons responded, and then we set up a time to do interviews with them. So in the interviews, the first thing we did, now these are all very active patrons, people who have self-reported that they come to the Chicago Public Library website, weekly, if not daily. So the first thing we did is we put a page, just blank page of paper in front of them and said, okay, you come to the site every day. Can you draw the site from memory? So here's some examples of what they drew. Here is the Chicago Public Library logo. They said there's a picture here. There's some links and events. And then they circled, this is the catalog, my account, and this is what they go to. And then all of this, so the majority of the content on the page is just a big question mark, like I don't know. Here's another example. Again, they're circling, this is the only area of use. So my CPL, here, no idea. And again, these are people who come to the library every day and are self-reported very active patrons. So we took that then and used that information to redesign the whole site, and we actually built a whole new system for any public library to use through a subscription service that we provide. But with the Chicago Public, we then had in-person interviews, we had observations, we reviewed their site stats. Even very active patrons were often unaware of the majority of library services. Patrons were attracted to the label hidden gems, more so than bestsellers, which was interesting. I think lots of times in libraries people think, oh, people keep coming in to ask for bestsellers. We really need to emphasize bestsellers. Another hypothesis is just that patrons hear about bestsellers so many times, so that's the only path they know, but they're actually very eager to hear about other paths to find something good. So that also informed a lot of our decisions in the design. The other thing was that most patrons weren't interested in traditional research, like database-related research, but were very interested in information around life events and aspirations and activities, like planning a wedding or learning a language. Those kind of databases, travel and cooking. So thinking about how could we redesign the experience online to focus on those sort of aspirational or life events rather than using the words research too much. This is an example of the site stats, and again, this bears out what we've seen with every library really, is that the site views on the previous Chicago site, 85% are right into either search or my account. So all the work the library is doing in their usability studies otherwise, which usually involves this stuff, the majority of people visiting the site are not going to the website. They're going straight into the catalog. So in case you'd like to do more with usability studies, either on your website or intranet, I did write a Computers and Libraries article. It was in 2008, which is a while ago, but the actual techniques are all still valid. And so we talk about the card sorts we've done, how to set up usability studies, and some more specifics in terms of getting volunteers. So that kind of outlines that information. And then also, it's very exciting. Don't Make Me Think is sort of a Bible of basic, easy web usability. And the new version just came out last year. He's revised it to also be about mobile usability. So very important as more and more people are accessing Internet-related resources from their mobile devices. So I would strongly recommend that book as well. So hopefully I've given you a bit more to kind of think about things from the eagle's view. But it's not just about seeing the forest, but also looking at the trees down to the little bug on the leaf, and then back up. Because really libraries are everything. It's the big, the medium, the little, and it's all part of the whole library experience that patrons are experiencing all the time. So the other thing is just a reminder of don't forget to celebrate the good things, so people aren't just stressed out when you come to do studies at the library. They don't think it's about what they're not sort of doing wrong. So celebrate the good things, and happy looking. So I hope you're all inspired to go and do fun studies and share the results with your colleagues. So do we have any questions?
Yeah, and again, if any of you have questions or comments, you feel free to share those in the question box. Erica, if you wouldn't mind going back to your first slide, or the one that has your contact information, that would be awesome, so people can see that. While you were doing that, one of the questions came in from Bobby, and she asks, what do you think about Facebook as a tool as far as gathering patron experiences?
Would it be like patron experiences, like just asking people on Facebook to share their ideas?
Yeah, for patron feedback.
Yeah, I think it's good. I think that people are it's also probably a great place to ask for volunteers. If they're friends with you on Facebook or, they're following your library on Facebook, they're probably pretty hardcore patron library supporters and would probably be open to coming into doing, interviews. So it would definitely be a great place to get participants that way. I think that asking people on Facebook is a good idea. Just like, asking questions is always a good idea. I think that sometimes, depending on what people would say, I don't know that it would always be a place where people would share less than positive comments or you would want them to share less than positive comments. I think lots of times when it's public, people would be more likely to be polite.
That's true. And as a follow-up to that, Leanne asks, would you say patrons use Facebook more for library events, programs, etc., over your library's website?
No, I wouldn't. I mean, I'm not saying that people don't look at it. It definitely, I mean, I guess I should say, let me rephrase that. Right now, I don't necessarily see that across all libraries, but I would definitely say that in the future, and so from now on, that I think that people are more likely to get their content that way. Okay, that doesn't make any sense what I just said. Let me back up. So the New York Times actually did this innovation report last year, which is really, really good, and everyone should go get it. At first, it was not provided to the public, but it was leaked. And one thing that was really interesting in this innovation report was that the New York Times saw their homepage hits just like plummeting. So, and that what they found is that very few people were searching for information or coming to the homepage of the New York Times. Instead, because people get so much information coming at them from Facebook or from other, social networks that they are involved in, is that people assume that they are getting all the information that they need. They're not going to go out and seek it. So because of that, library content, like events, like whatever, needs to be easily shareable, and that way promoted through Facebook and Twitter and things like that. So it's not that your website doesn't matter, but that everything on your website needs to be easily shareable and promoted that way so that people who are friends with the library then take your content and share it out to their social networks. So in that case, I totally agree. That is super, super vital in terms of the sort of ability to get online strategy, a successful online strategy. So.
Great. Deborah asks, what were your findings about self-check stations and shelving and signage?
Well, for the self-check, it was really very specific. So that was we did a couple observations watching people, are they successful or not, and then we did some very specific questions around, so like one of them, and this is a couple years ago, so I'm trying to think back, but one example was, did the self-check screens make sense to the patrons, or did they get confused by it? So one of the things we did is that we took the PIN requirement of adding the PIN to when you checked in through the self-check. We took that off because that was a barrier to people using the self-check. And we thought, when people check out at the desk, they don't have to give their PIN to the staff member. So we decided not to require that for the self-checks either. That's probably the biggest thing that I remember making a change to. Some self-check machines are more configurable than others. So that was, anyway, I can't remember anything else other than that we stopped requiring the PIN because that was such a barrier.
Okay.
In terms of shelving and signage, with shelving, one of the things was this idea that, like, as people are coming into the library, and this isn't, like, amazing. I mean, I think lots of people do this. It's just that for whatever reason, like, our new bookshelf was not actually near, in most library buildings, it was not actually near the place where people would pick up holds. And there's always logistics there, where can you put the holds to pick up? And, where is there space for the new titles? But, thinking about shelves that catch people's interest. The other thing was that when we would do observations with patrons coming in, and we would ask them, what strikes your interest, or if I saw them pick up something from the staff picks page, or sorry, staff picks shelf, why did you pick that book up? What was interesting about it? Most times it was that people recognized a path that was successful to them in the past of finding something they liked. So if it was an author that they had enjoyed in the past, if it was a staff member that they had liked their recommendations in the past, people are so busy, they don't really have time to try to read something that they aren't really sure, or pretty sure, is going to have a payoff for them. So what would be the best use of their time? And that comes up a lot.
Great. Could you repeat a few of the examples as far as when talking about where to observe the library experience as far as the observations?
In terms of observing in the library and
yes.
online and through mobile?
In the library.
Yeah. Oh, well, so one possibility, do you mean like the different options in terms of like walking in the patron's path?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, this is actually a really fun project. This would be a fun thing to kind of assign to everyone and just have them, share their experiences. So one possibility would be to say, okay, I'm going to come to the library and pick up my holds, and I'm going to use the self-check. And so, you walk through the whole experience, like you pull into the patron's parking lot, you go through the front doors of the library, not the staff doors, and go through the whole experience. So one would be, picking up my holds. Another would be coming to an event with my kid. Another would be using the library's computers, like maybe I want to do genealogy research or something that you want to focus on. It can really just be anything that you expect people to come in and do, but then actually just walk through the process and see, well, how easy is it for them to actually do this?
Sure.
How do they figure out which computers to go to?
Great. And Joseph asked, how do you approach patron privacy and Patriot Act concerns while doing this research?
I'm not sure how the Patriot Act would be involved right off the top of my head. In terms of just general patron privacy, when we were doing kind of on-the-fly interviews, it was just sort of, I'm not taking down their name or anything. I'm just asking them some questions. For interviews and specifically like usability studies, we would have them sign, permission, and also we would and have parent permission, so we would never do a usability study with kids or teens without parental permission. And we also always told people when it was actually a usability study, so they're in the room with us, we would always remind them that we can stop whenever they want to. Just trying to make people feel really comfortable and that it's a very informal setting so that they're not feeling stressed out.
Great. And Erica, I want to quickly ask you as a follow-up, and I'm going to ask all of our speakers this, what do you find most exciting about working in libraries right now?
Well, I think there's so much opportunity for public libraries, and it's just such an exciting time for public libraries as a whole. You think of how many times you see like BuzzFeed or other lists around books, and that's what we do as librarians. So I love all that. There's so much there's so much excitement around books and reading. So I think that is really exciting. And also, I'm very excited about this merge of the space of the online and the physical library. So being able to walk into the library and then your mobile device, knows you're there and is able to then give you recommendations, all these cool ideas that we could expand upon. So I think it's just a really exciting time to be in public libraries as a whole.
Great. Well, Erica, thank you for a great webinar. You gave us a lot to think about. I just want to remind all of you that the slides are already available up on our website. The recording will be available hopefully later today. If not, it will be available tomorrow. Our next session, it comes up at 10:30, and that will be on creating welcoming and accessible libraries for children with special needs. So if you're not signed up and want to attend that, you certainly can. I want to thank you again, Erica, for a great presentation. Thank you all for listening in. We hope to see you for another session. If not, thank you for participating in this one. Goodbye.